The Book of Wisdom, broadly speaking, can be divided into three parts. The first one deals with the destinies of the good and the evil, so general wisdom there, observing life. The second one is of a very high tone. It speaks as though wisdom herself was speaking, in the form of a meditation. And then finally, we have a review of Israel's own history. Now, the reading that we have today is from that part. We have the way in which God is patient, His forbearance is coming through. Yes, you love all that exists. So that takes us back to the ambit of our great English mystic, Julian of Norwich, way back in the 1300s or so, when she was able to see with divine vision and knowledge the way in which God sustained all. She saw all that was ever made as round as a ball in the palm of God's hand, and He kept it in being because she was amazed that it should not just dissolve into nothingness because it was so small. And she was given to understand three things. God made it, God loved it, God sustained it. And so it is that creation does not disintegrate. There is a continuous presence and a continuous creation. It's not just one moment, but it's sustained in being. And so are we. Should for one moment God discontinue this operation of giving existence, we would just be cancelled from eternity. But it is not so. Once created, we carry on, and He does not have any loathing for anything that He has created. That same mystic was puzzled by the question of the soul that doesn't make it and the beyond. And yet somehow even that is in that power, providence and wisdom too. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Presumably, even those who are not saved in some strange way glorify the one who made them, for He is an infinitely great God and has His rights. And therefore we have to be careful, actually, especially when in certain times and seasons we speak exclusively of one aspect of God's greatness, that of His mercy, that we forget also His justice, for He nevertheless is our God, and He is the judge, and not we ourselves. We sometimes creep into that and encroach upon His throne and authority, and judge ourselves, even without knowing what is the true position in the beyond. So, He is God, and we mustn't forget that. He's not a chum or a toy that we play around with freely. So this reading does remind us of the greatness of God. You spare all things, because all things are yours, Lord, lover of life. You whose imperishable spirit is in all. One sees how different degrees of life become more and more glorious as they come, first of all, to the higher animals who can have a rapport with humans, and then with humans themselves. It is interesting to see how higher animals often have saved the lives of human beings. One thinks of dogs. One thinks of the ponies and horses down in the mines in Wales. They knew danger before men did, and on it would go. And how many, before the invention of the motor car, had a relation on the level of understanding with, for instance, their horse. These were higher animals with a great awareness of things in their own animal way. So this is life, and all life is a reflection of the life giver. Little by little, therefore, you correct those who offend, so things which seem to us bad can be gentle corrections from on high, and need to be read as such. What is God trying to tell me in this? It's useless just cursing the dark. Maybe we are the dark. You admonish and remind them of how they have sinned. God, they say, writes straight with crooked lines. Again, Julian of Norwich. The way in which she saw clearly that nothing, and she made no exception, happened without divine permission and without being for our good. God draws good from events, and so she was given to understand that that was the way that events should be received. All shall be well. There is a goodness in this event. Unfortunately, we refuse the grace of the event. We think we know better, and we protest that the event was a mistake in history. It shouldn't have happened. We are the mistakes. We are the causes of things going wrong. It's complex, but God gets the blame for our mistakes. Is it not true? So that they may abstain from evil and trust in you, Lord. The psalm, always linked with the first reading, echoes well its tone. It is a psalm of praise, the last of the acrostic psalms in the Psalter. These are the ones that begin Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and so on. Alphabet comes from the Greek word alpha, beta, but the Aleph, Bet of the Hebrew also is an alphabet which comes through as these acrostic psalms, beginning with the letter of the alphabet in question. And when these psalms of praise are sung, they are like our hymns, and so we can find wonderful melodies, not complex, but they make a great impact when they are sung in church with a lovely echo coming through and the whole congregation responding in song. These are meant to be sung and not just whizzed through as though the first section was an unstoppable flow of unbreakable words. There's a difference between a reading and a hymn, and so that should be felt in the psalm. It is fitting, as we approach the end of the liturgical year, and therefore the coming of Advent, and in between the Feast of Christ the King, that we should have our eyes cast towards the coming Christ. This happens, as it happens now in this reading from the first letter to the Thessalonians. We have these writings of Paul coming through here in these last Sundays, and we have in the first letter to the Thessalonians probably the earliest part of all of the letters of St. Paul. In fact, maybe of the whole of the New Testament as it's come down to us. They are fairly early, these words from St. Paul, writing to the second of the churches he has founded in Europe. Corinth probably would have been the first. So here we have this element of admonition in a spirit of fervour and awaiting. They are excited about things. Christ is expected to come back. The parousia is expected in the immediate, and it has consequences on social life. Why bother to work? Why bother to do things if this is all going to stop? And so he reacts against that. We do well what we have to do, bearing in mind that we're only here in view of meeting the Lord. So that raises what we do to that level and doesn't become an end in itself. It's important that we don't lose that vision of things as we go through the day. Homeward bound must be the tone of our hymn. The Gospel is quaint. St. Luke doesn't usually give names. He's not into that. if he does, it's a person of note. So the fact that he gives the name of Zachary, this gentleman, Zacchaeus rather, is interesting. It means that he would have been known, and maybe not for the best reasons, in the area. So his conversion has a certain impact. They complain, as human beings are pretty good at, especially when there's an element of envy coming through. This person, who's not a nice person for them, is having privileged treatment. Why should the Lord choose his house for hospitality? We are not amused. He, of course, indicates what he's at. This too is a son of Abraham, Zacchaeus. It is Semitic, and he was a spiritual child of Abraham. Because he was generous in his conversion, he meant what he said. But note that he did not necessarily leave his occupation. He sanctified it. That's interesting. And this, then, as a conclusion, the Son of Man has come to seek out and save what was lost. Isn't that what we are called to do in his name? The lost are always around us, those who are lost in life, but those who, because of that, are at risk of being eternally lost. Remember, the word lost in Latin is damnatus. Damned simply means lost. We have lost the soul. One time, some years ago, a long time ago now, I was still a novice, and there was a little girl that we knew who had special gifts from the Lord, because it can occasionally happen in innocent childhood in very good families that children can have special gifts and not be aware of it actually fully. They think everyone has the same. But this was the case in this child. While she was still a child, she would hear the Lord's voice, and so we sometimes would be able to ask one or two things through this child. Well, there were two cases of death, one after the other, in bits of a family which were slightly related to each other, two sides of the same family. And in one case, it was something which concerned us quite directly, because we were in the cloister going to sing the conventual mass, and we had with us a friend, a priest friend, in line concelebrating with us, but his family would have been nearby. And suddenly the cloister door opened, and in ran somebody and whispered something in his ear, so he immediately took off his chasuble and himself ran out. And they had found somebody dead. It was a lassie who was nice, and she would have been even frequenting the monastery quite a bit, even on weekdays sometimes, and she was found dead, but hanging on the tie of her father in the wardrobe. And it was a very bizarre situation, because the previous night she'd been talking to her boyfriend and everything, and there was no indication of anything. But anyway, something must have flipped, and she took her own life. So we were very concerned about this and wanted to know what had happened to the soul. And we did discover through this little child that apparently the soul hadn't been lost, but was in the lowest level of purgatory and needed 40 eternal fathers. That's the prayer of St. Bridget, to get out of that level. So I undertook that. And when I got to the 40th, I was quite moved, because I felt, yes, there's something happening here. She's getting out of that level. But then there was another one, but at the same time, which was a bit more stark. It was somebody who was found, I think, in a lake. And asking about that, this response came back: he is lost. Evil had got hold of him. So that word lost echoed in my heart and soul and mind, and has ever since, what it is to go lost through this life and the next. And this is precisely what the Lord is trying to stop. He has come to save, but indeed to seek out and to save the lost. And he's pleading with us on bended knees, please speak out. You are my mouthpiece. Save souls. All the rest can wait. Our Lady's answer concerning 2 suicides. He is lost. Evil had got hold of him. She is in the deepest level of purgatory and needs 40 eternal fathers to get out of there. Somewhere there is a pain that no one knows, and e'en as I now write, a world beyond the grasp of rhyme fills all the time that flows on, and on, in trickles that no bond but history confines to evermore. For that the moment's writ was stamped for aye upon the deep blotched soul that roamed before within the realm of lasting yea and nay. Somewhere there is a sorrow that is long, but not as long as ever, and 'twould seem that in this word was heard a sigh so strong that it brought to Tartaric depths a gleam, hid in a drop of blood. A little drop, big enough to make the aeons stop.